I worked seasonal jobs pretty much all through my 20s on and off until the last 2 years I had a full-time job, which I quit, and now I'm going back to seasonal work at 29. I get a lot of questions in my personal life about how to get into seasonal work or how much money you can save or where you even find jobs, what it's like, who can do it. So I just wanted to make this kind of overall guide for anybody who's interested. I'm going to put as much as I can up on the screen, and then I have as many links as I can below in the description, and then I have a separate blog post that writes out literally all of this with links. You can find that below too. On my page, I share my own journey back into seasonal work, some of the stuff I've done in the past. I'm going to be driving from Michigan to Alaska soon and interviewing a bunch of people up there about their seasonal work, but also I talk to people who just have less traditional career paths, are doing different kind of jobs I just didn't know about growing up because I don't know if I'm going to be in seasonal work forever or what's coming next. So if you're on that journey too, then feel free to follow along. Okay, let's get into the seasonal work. So first, what is seasonal work? Basically, of course, anything that you can do changing from season to season could technically be seasonal work. For the purpose of this video, I'm going to focus on the outdoor industry mostly because that's what I've worked in. And there's so many jobs there, and that's kind of the main group, I think, of what people are doing when they want to save a decent chunk of money in a season. So, for example, the summer season here in the States, Canada area, is usually kind of May through September, give or take, depending on what you're doing, where you are, all that. And a lot of people who do seasonal work that season, usually working long hours, living on site most of the time, really giving yourself to this job. But a lot of people can save so much money that they travel the rest of the year. Or when I did it, I was saving up to go to grad school, so it helped me pay for school. Some people are going and taking care of a family member or going back to their family in the off season or have just a life at home that they go back to or are stacking these seasonal jobs into a career. So there's so many different ways to do it. I'm going to go through some of the jobs now. There are so many. So focusing on outdoor tourism world, there's everything from like guides, naturalists, interpreters, that sort of thing. That's what I currently do up in Alaska is work as a hiking and kayaking guide. I also am a naturalist on our other excursions, but there's specialized guides for them. So those are like bear viewing, deep sea fishing, glacier trekking, all these different activities. So you can work in that realm of things, but also there are people who are washing dishes, housekeeping, working in the kitchen, working front desks at kind of more hotel style lodges. There's people working in gift shops as baristas. I'm gonna look at my notes so I can just give it all to y'all. Chefs, line cooks, you can do that in the backcountry and be like a backcountry chef cook out in the over the fire or whatever. Maintenance workers, there's bush pilots, helicopter pilots, more specialized stuff like that. Concierge and event coordinators for places that have that sort of thing going on. Then there's also all these different subdivisions of work. I'm just going to briefly go over some so you kind of have an idea of options outside of this. There is stuff purely focused on boats, right? So there's yachts, sailboats, cruise ships, all different, completely different worlds, honestly. You can do fishing, as in commercial fishing. You can do guiding on fishing boats. You can do, there's people who work on the like National Geographic tours as dive instructors, people who work on yachts, and there's a lot of pages that people have dedicated to that because you can make a lot of money. I know people have been like private chefs on yachts, or if you've seen the show Below Deck, kind of get the idea of what stewardess are doing. There are education and youth programs, so maybe being like a camp counselor or in some sort of specialized role for youth. There's rafting guides, biking guides, horseback guides. I've done that job. So many different types of programs that you can get into. Ooh, garden educator. That's another cool job I've seen. Again, there's like horses, equine, ranch work, all this different stuff. So there's dude ranches you can work on. There's also actual real operating ranches where people do need seasonal workers so you can live out your cowboy, cowgirl dreams. And that reminds me, because I think especially ranches, but a lot of outdoor tourism, again, I'm talking about the summer season a lot, but there are usually winter seasons at places, depends. Some places will have you stay all year round if you want, or have kind of an off season, but still keep some staff on to do maintenance through. So there are year round positions at some of these places. And then there's also ways to piece together your seasons. So lots of options. I'm not going to talk about it so much here, but there are people who work seasonally at like events and festivals and those kind of things. I used to do that, building stages and building art. I have an interview on my YouTube with somebody who does that as part of her full-time job situation. So you can go check that out if you want to know more about that. There are, of course, a lot of agricultural jobs. That's really popular in the holiday working visa in Australia, which is a whole different subject that I'll make videos on too. But there's also ones in the States. So people who do work camping, which is kind of people who live in RVs or their van, and they exchange their time around the country at these different places like campgrounds or retreat centers. And they exchange some time and labor for a place to park their van, for sometimes meals, for sometimes pay on top of that for different tasks. There's all different arrangements. Anyway, that's a whole nother thing as well. But in that community, I learned about there's this thing called the beet harvest in the Midwest. There's also the Idaho potato harvest. And then there's some other harvests where people will go and work. Actually, it's pretty much in the off season from other stuff. So like September, October time, I think, maybe even November. And they do really long hours over just a few weeks to save money. And again, there are so many different lifestyles that play into this, which is why it's hard. You'll see I interviewed in another video a professor of like outdoor rec, and he talks about how if you're going to do the seasonal thing, a lot of it is kind of a lifestyle. It doesn't have to be. Some people just do it for a season and then go back to their lives or go back to school or go back to whatever's next for them. It can be a stepping stone, but for people who want to make it their full-time thing, it does become a whole world and lifestyle onto itself. And there are so many different things. So there's seasonal work like I'm talking about in the tourism world. There's these work campers I talked about. There's people who are doing work exchange, maybe overseas or in the US, and are trading their time to be able to stay places for free and then have free time to do their own thing as well. There's nannying, au pairing, there's like travel nursing. There is so many different jobs that I probably don't even know about that can happen on a seasonal schedule. But again, I'm going to focus on that kind of outdoor tourism world. Okay, everyone wants to know about pay. So yes, this work is paid. Again, I mentioned a bunch of different exchange stuff that exists, but let's focus on, say, someone going to work a big summer or winter season specifically to save money. The pay is going to vary so much from different jobs, and what you can save is going to vary a lot. So some of the main factors in that are, is your job including housing and also potentially food? I think if it includes housing or not and food is going to determine how much you can save in a lot of places, because some of these big companies will have staff housing, a lot of time not the best housing, and multiple people in one room or different options, and you can pay into that, like however much they charge you out of your paycheck every pay period to live in the communal housing. And sometimes that's like the only option unless you have a hookup in a van, something like that. So those situations exist. It's going to be a lot harder to save money when you're paying, especially depending on how much you're getting paid versus how much you're paying into these things. Same thing, a lot of these are in remote places, hard to get groceries. You could end up spending a lot on food. You're definitely going to have the best luck saving money if you're somewhere that pays for your housing, which I've been lucky and selective that the places I've worked do include housing, my own room, shared bathroom usually, or like in Alaska. Let's describe them. So my first one in New Mexico, I had like my own little casita essentially, or we kind of split one. It was just a bedroom. And then I walked to the communal showers and stuff. And then there was a meal hall where I got all my meals. And it's not like I could have even gone anywhere else to get food, really. So this was all included because kind of has to be. I actually really think it's messed up that these big employers make the employees pay to live somewhere that benefits the employer, right? Like having employees on site where they're accessible to you is a benefit to the employer. So I think employers should always have to pay for this stuff, but they don't. So that's one thing to consider. Where I work up in Alaska, I lived in the guide house the first time. It's like 4 or 5 bedrooms. We had running water. All the staff housing there does not have bathrooms, use outhouses in a lot of rural Alaska. And where I'm living this summer, it's a cabin split between 2 of us, so like 2 different rooms in a cabin, no running water, still has electricity. So different things. Again, I'll say it so much throughout different videos. Seasonal work is not going to be for everyone in the sense that it's not accessible to everyone, of course. It's also not what a lot of people would want to do. So that's fair. Keep that in mind. But housing can vary a ton, and how much money you're going to save can vary a ton. I linked in that blog post and down below different Reddit posts where people are pretty transparent. I think it's the internet, so they can lie, but I think they're being pretty transparent about how much they're able to make at different places, how much they save. So for example, there's this cool influencer I've been following who works as a bartender seasonally, and then she bought a sailboat. And she talked about how she saved $20K at her first bartending seasonal job, and then she wanted to save $40K the next season. So that's what some people are making. I know people have done commercial fishing, which is a rough job, living on the boat, living that lifestyle day in and day out. But up in Alaska, some people can do that for like 5 months and walk away with $60K in a really good season with a good company, fishing the right thing, having a lucky season. Some people have done it for 3 months and only walked away with $10K because it wasn't a good season or whatever. So there's a big range on those kind of jobs. And again, not ideal conditions. Not a lot of people would want to do it, but can be a good way to save money. Other bartending things, I've talked to friends who worked on Block Island off Rhode Island and said that people who stayed like 5 months and really worked on saving money could save like $50K. A lot of people are walking away with more like $10 to $30K, staying a bit shorter season. And people who do these seasonal jobs, I already mentioned it, but some people just travel the world like the rest of their time off, or buy a sailboat, or do all sorts of crazy stuff. Some people use that money to fund whatever their, passion career is in life. Like I'm kind of trying to do that where, I don't need to talk about me right now. We'll get to that later. But yeah, I linked as many resources as I could to kind of understand how people are making money and saving it in seasonal. You'll see some of these Reddit comments where people are working at these bigger organizations, usually through national parks. They're living in housing they don't really like. They're spending a bunch of money and they're only saving a few K every summer, which still isn't nothing and maybe is better than staying at home and paying your bills. So that's one of the things about this, is that seasonal work can be totally life-changing for some people, realizing that they can save up these big chunks of money and have a lot more freedom in their life. Of course, not everybody has the freedom to do that. If you have kids or a family member you're taking care of, or just a career that you built into, or something that's tying you somewhere, of course, this is not for everybody. Health insurance is a huge subject that I'll make a whole nother video on. It is possible. Lots of people have health insurance who live this lifestyle, but just like any self-employment or seasonal work of sorts in the US, it's hard to navigate and is going to be a limitation for some people. Accessibility in some of these places, a lot of these places, and just the culture of this work. There are so many things about it that are limiting, that are barriers, that are not going to be ideal for everyone. I just want to say that it's a big privilege to be able to live this lifestyle, and it's also not that glamorous, and I'll make separate videos about de-influencing from seasonal work. All that to say that when people find the right place where they are happy and well taken care of, they can save a lot of money that I have never been able to save by working a full-time job, or usually multiple jobs, and living in the city. I feel like I'm always broke, and I've found some of these seasonal jobs where I am able to save tens of thousands of dollars and invest in different things in my life, and it has been really freeing for me personally. And that's part of why I want to do this, is because this has been a huge privilege to work in this field and to do all these different jobs. And I know it's not going to work for everybody, but if I can make the path and options a little bit more accessible for anyone who is interested in this weird niche life, then I want to do that. So please let me know your questions. I will make more videos. I will answer them. I just want people to have this information. So again, please look at the blog post, because it has literally every link I can think of in there and every resource. It's not some guide you have to DM me for. It's all there. It's for free. I did ask a few people in my life about I have a friend who's in her 30s and does seasonal work full time. She works as a bear guide and then as Aurora Borealis guide. She's in school right now, so doing kind of a different path, but people do it full time. I've asked them, how do you make this like financially reasonable, where you're saving money over time, not just saving money and then spending it? And she said the way that she's been able to do that is lining up seasonal jobs in advance, so she knows, or going back to the same ones the next year, right? So she knows where she's going to be, how much time she's going to have off, and how much money around she can expect to make, which makes like saving and planning for your life a lot more reasonable in this, what can be a pretty unstable career. I want to talk more about who can do this job. I think that there might be a stereotype that it's all for young people. Of course, there are certain jobs that are catered towards people taking a gap year or taking time off from college in the summer. There are a lot of young people in this, of course. There's also people who do it, as their career throughout their whole life. There's people who get into it later in life. I see a lot of that. I work with plenty of people where I've worked that had kids young, they grew up, and now they're kind of starting this as a second phase in their career in their life. And it's allowing them to travel and see the world and work, a little later. And I've even had coworkers that are doing the same job as me, and they're like 50, and they've done all these insane guiding things, and they and their wife do it together, and it's really cool. And it's so cool to see how different people bridge this life and use it to their advantage, which I kind of think is the whole thing. Everyone's looking for financial freedom, right? And sometimes geographical freedom and all these different things that this job can provide people when it works out. Doesn't always work out. I saw this Reddit post the other day. I love Reddit, as you can tell. I saw this Reddit post the other day on r/seasonal work, which is a great resource, linked below, of someone saying he works in tech. He had a family member pass away recently, and just really inspired him that he wanted to do a seasonal job, like as far away from civilization as possible. He'd do whatever job, housekeeping, guiding, whatever it was. He had some experience in those things in the past. And it was a little bit later in life. And then people in the comments were saying the same thing, like, oh, I got into seasonal work after someone in my life passed away, and it just kind of changed my perspective on life. And, I'm still in it years later, or they did it for a while and went back to their life. All that to say that there are so many different reasons that people get into seasonal work, whether it's your summer break from college, or you're saving up for grad school, or you're maybe a scientist. Like, I studied ecology and I was doing field research, and I just knew it wasn't going to be my path to go deeply into research. So how else can we use those skills and that knowledge? Yeah, there's so many different reasons. You're going to meet so many different kinds of people in this field. I've had work environments where I was the youngest one at 20, and there were people more like a retreat center where people could volunteer too. They weren't working, but were in their 70s, and we had this big community. I love intergenerational communities, and that's something really cool that that's something really cool that seasonal work can facilitate. So it can be this amazing, life-changing thing. But finding the right seasonal job that works for you, I just want to say I want to say that it's like, oh, any job, make sure that the company somewhat aligns with you, that you're going to like your coworkers, you're going to like your manager, as much as you can before you get there. But in seasonal work, that's so much more important, because you're probably going to be living, eating meals with, doing everything with these people under a lot of stress. Just because the work itself might not be stressful, but when you're doing it 6 days a week for 5 months or whatever, that's a lot of time together and a lot of time in these often remote spaces. So who you work with, who you work for, it's all going to matter so much. And I would hate for somebody to show up at a seasonal job and feel trapped there because the environment they're in doesn't align with, their cultural, religion, or gender identity, or in some way that you would feel unsafe. And I have heard of people showing up at seasonal work and feeling that way. You can always leave. You don't really owe anyone anything. But obviously, for your financial situation and for the company and for everybody involved, it's best to get as much information as you can before, which is why I will say always vet your seasonal jobs as much as possible. A great way to do that is going on to Reddit or Facebook groups, and I linked a bunch below, and asking, I got a job offer from this place. Has anybody worked there? What's the culture like? How much money were you able to save? Because this is a lifestyle, it's also a community. And I think people are really willing to share their experiences and, want the best for each other to make this unique lifestyle work. Okay, the big one is, where do you find work? So I'm going to take you kind of from beginner methods to advanced. And this is where the links and all that stuff is going to be really handy for you to see, actually, but I'll list as much as I can here. So you're going to start with basic. There's websites tailored to seasonal work. So Coolworks is going to be your main one. That's where I found my Alaska summer job actually years ago. And you can search by category, as in I want to work with horses, or I want to work in Montana, or I want to do a conservation job. You can search by all these different things. That is kind of the golden star of seasonal work, I would say. But also it does get criticism because it's kind of picked through and competitive because everybody knows about it. And people say, I don't know if it's just people's perception or if it's real, but people tend to say like it's not as good as it used to be. So I listed a ton of other websites. I'll show them here, but again, on that blog post. And these are a bunch of other websites that people use. Some are getting more popular than others. Even going on Indeed and searching by like seasonal work or includes housing is sometimes where a lot of the seasonal jobs are too. So it's like basic, look at those. Job boards, there's this one called Occupation Wild, which is newer but growing, and they have a bunch of jobs on there, link to that. Newsletters, Basecamp is an outdoor industry newsletter, but they have a seasonal section and it's pretty extensive right now. That is a paid newsletter, or there's a paid version of it. So you can explore what you can get for free, or it's like a few bucks. It's pretty useful either way. Okay, the most, I think, slept on way to find seasonal work is Facebook groups. And really, like any alternative lifestyle stuff, there's so many niche Facebook groups. You could say, I want to sail this route, I have this experience, and like look into that, and you can probably find a Facebook group of people looking for you. It's so specific. Again, I listed a ton of my favorites for a ton of different things, from where to find like horse, equine, dude ranch jobs, to where to find guiding jobs, to where to find sailing, yacht work. There's all these different things. And people will share and advertise jobs on there. But another thing about it is that you can sell yourself too. So you can introduce yourself, say exactly who you are and what you're looking for. And I've seen, people make connections on there. There's that. Again, like I mentioned before, it's also a great place to vet jobs. Say, I got an offer from here. Has anybody seen this? Or, oh, I want a job where I can bring my dog, which is rare to have housing that lets you do that. But I see those posts all the time, and people say here, here, and here. Yeah, it's an amazing resource. Use Facebook. Get on Facebook. Again, I listed a ton of different links. Okay. On top of that, Reddit is a great resource, as I mentioned a bunch of times. r/seasonal work really can give you an insight into the community, the lifestyle, and as detailed as how much money somebody made at some place in a previous year. So it's really useful. This may be obvious, but the best place to find your next seasonal job is at your current one. So getting into seasonal work, maybe you don't get your dream job, the first one, maybe you just get, a basic whatever job off of Coolworks that looks good enough for you or whatever. And you do that, and then you're gonna meet so many people. If you are, a people person or good at making connections with your coworkers, maybe even your managers, the owners, you're gonna hear so many other jobs come up. People say, oh, I was doing this job down wherever in Florida in the winter and I made this much money, and oh, could you connect me to that? So there's gonna be so much word of mouth, and I think a ton of people find their next job that way. The last way I will say, which is more of like playing the long game, but if I was to look for a new seasonal job right now and I wanted it to be high paying and long term and in alignment with my values, I would do this. I would go and find like my dream places, and usually these aren't going to be advertised on Coolworks or something because they have so many returning staff or have a good enough reputation they can go by word of mouth that they don't need to advertise on these big platforms. So let's say I wanted a ranch that also does conservation initiatives. So I find a few ranches, conservation initiatives. It looks like, from what I can tell from their social media and stuff, I align with their culture. It looks like they probably pay well because it's well established over a long period of time and they have high-end services or something. I'm gonna look at those things, find like my few dream ones, and then I'm gonna look on LinkedIn or social media in general and see if I can find somebody who's worked there either in the past or presently who's in a role I would like to be. Reach out to them, and it's really important you do this not in a demanding way, like, oh, I want a job, like how can you get me one? But in a, I see what you do, I've done something similar, it's my dream to live like that, and I just was wondering if I could talk to you a little bit more about like your path and your advice. And I will say, these are called informational interviews. You can do this in any discipline. I've done this so many times. Like I've gotten into, I used to want to work in museums. So when I would travel or be somewhere even visiting family, I would look at the local museum and somebody with a cool job, and I would say, can I come talk to you? And they say, sure. And then you get to go to the museum for free, and they're usually really inspiring and nice. And I would just recommend this no matter what jobs, careers you're talking about in life. And that's kind of the whole project of this started, where I interview people about their unique careers and paths and lifestyles, because I love talking to people and doing these informational interviews. So you can do those. Anyway, do that in this situation, just leading with curiosity, not expecting anything out of it. do that. And then if you still want to work there, you could go to the company itself, the owners, whatever, contact them and say, oh, I got to connect with this other person who's worked for you, and they had so many great things to say, and I really admired their path, and I would love to make a connection with this company and learn more to be, I would love to be considered for future opportunities. And I would go from there and see what happens. I think that I've heard of people doing this in other industries outside of seasonal work. I think it applies to seasonal work. Again, I'm calling it seasonal work, but it's not always seasonal. People live and work on these ranches year round or like make careers out of it. It's kind of up to you what you want to build from this work. And that is the basic overview. Again, I do these interviews, different people with different interesting jobs I just didn't know about growing up, or I still don't know about how they work. I do that, and I'm going to follow my own journey as a seasonal worker, stories of all my weird side quests in my 20s. And yeah, I'll try to be transparent about the money I make and just like the pros and cons of this lifestyle, and always happy to answer questions and make the pathway to it a little clearer for people. If there's anything you want to know, let me know.